Okay, so Max Little Salt. So we'll get to how he becomes a judge later on here. So this is one of his pictures when he became a judgehood by melt and snow in the 1950s. So I just want to let you know, when me and Uncle Charlie came in to town, I took this picture before we left on Friday. And
Wow.
so this is the entrance way. Right here, there's a little bit of rubble. This used to be the old trading post at Sayet Canyon that used to lead into the actual canyon here.
That's snow?
That is snow. So just to give you an idea of the Navajo reservation before we start talking about the areas here. So this is where I come from, a place called Ganado, Arizona. It's a famous trading post called Hubbell's Trading Post. And so from here, this is where Kayenta is, and about right here is where Marsh Pass is, and this is primarily where Max Little Salt and the whole entire family resides. So actually, a lot of misnomers is about Max Little Salt is that they think that he actually came from the canyon, but he actually was married into the canyon of the Austin family. So Max came from here. This Navajo Mountain is just right at the border of Arizona and Utah. And he was born in these canyons here. So there's a lot of stories about Kit Carson and the Long Walk during this time. So there's a lot of the Little Salt family resides from here. And then there's a place here, right here is the monument, and that's where a lot of the stories take place. And there's another town, Inscription House, and there's another town here, Shanto, that we'll be talking about. So there's a lot of travel between Navajo Mountain area, Shanto, and Kayenta, and Sayet Canyon. So for me, like I said, I come from this area. My father wanted to seek higher education, so we moved to Tucson in 1985. I was 11 years old. So this is the last time so now when we visit northern Arizona, this is where we visit all the time. So let's begin here. So Max Little Salt was born in 1904 in Navajo Mountain. At the time, it was the Arizona Territory. And of course, Arizona didn't become a state until February of 1914 or 1911. His parents' English name was Jim and Jean Little Salt. And this, we don't see their English names until the 1920s. So for Jim, his actual Navajo name was Ashiha. It's Isa, meaning another form of little salt. And then the mother was Dugai Bitsitsi. So, and out of these children here, four, including him, 5 sons survived and 1 sister survived out of the 12 or 16 children that they had. So a lot of them had passed away when they were infants or before they even became an adult. So these 6 grew up very close. So you're going to talk, well, I taught through this whole presentation, learning about Max and his family. They were a very close family. They helped each other out, and we'll talk about that. So when I first began finding out about Max, so I only knew him in the late 70s and early 80s. And during that time, if you lived on the reservation, the intimacy between granddaughter and grandson wasn't there. So you were seen and you did what you were learned from your mothers, helping cook, prepare food, and delivering the food to the men who came in to eat. So I never really interacted with Max a lot. So it was a challenge to find out a lot. I found out a lot of things hearing from different children and family, not only just family, but friends of the families that came and I spoke to and interviewed. So here, I just want to let you know that Max went through a series of names. So, so first here is that he's Max. I didn't spell this right, but it's Dikuibiet, meaning hairy, Max, hairy, son of, hairy face. So from here, he goes to, his father, Jim Little Salt, is in a land dispute in the Shanto area with another family that resides in the same territory. And so it gets so heated that Jim thinks that they're going to go to court over this land, and it's all about cattle rights in this area. So Jim decides to have one of his sons go to school to learn how to speak right English, so that way in case he went to court, he would know what was being said during the court trials. So he sends Max to Tuba City. It's about 80 miles southwest of the Kayenta area. So Max goes to school there for a little over 10 years at this school in Tuba City, and it was called a Western Agency Indian School, boarding school. So through Uncle Charlie and listening to what Max did, he would sometimes hop on a wagon, or him and his buddies would run or walk the entire 80 miles back and forth from Tuba City to Kayenta to get home, or to the Shanto area. So here, Max, let me go to the next slide here. So this is Max's school in 1918. So in 1918 to 1919, there was the Spanish flu was going, and fortunately for this boarding school, the flu didn't hit as to where in Kayenta. They lost a few hundred Navajos in the Kayenta area to the flu epidemic. And so Max was here during that time, and this is when they're all lining up for roll call here in Tuba City at the agency boarding school. And this one here was a lucky find, because there was another researcher that was going through with a Hopi artist who went to Santa Fe School during the little later, about 1924, 1926. And they were trying to find information regarding this man called Tahoma. And so you read on the internet how frustrating it was when they go to Tuba City trying to find these records. And what they find out is that all these records are destroyed. They were in a fire. So this one was a lucky find from the Klein Museum in Flagstaff. And here, so this lady was a nurse's aide, and she took these pictures. She was part of the Mennonite school from the Hopi reservation. She took these pictures near Tuba City. And here is where, these are the kids that Max had gone to school with. So this is just the boys that they all lined up. So by this time, Max is about 15, 16 years old, going to school with all these boys. And there's some girls, but I figured I'd focus on the boys here. So this is this is the Western Agency Indian School, and here this is the employee housing for them. And this one here is where it's the honor group. So all of these young men and women had excellent grades, and I tried to figure out how did Max go from Tuba City all the way to Haskell Institute in Kansas. How did this young man decided in 1922 to go to Haskell Institute, where he could have gone to Santa Fe or Phoenix, or to Intermountain in Utah, which would have been a lot closer for him to go to school. And what I found was there was this court clerk from Window Rock who actually, her father and Max were friends at the Tuba City boarding school during that time. And she used to chauffeur Max and her father around, and so she heard a lot of stories. So according to her, Max since he had high honors at this particular school, he wanted to challenge himself and further his education. So since Carlisle was already closing in Pennsylvania, Haskell was the next best place for education for Native Americans at that time. So he ended up traveling to Haskell. So the next slide here is, this would have been his class in 1928. Oh, sorry, this is actually wrong. This is supposed to be 1924. So these are all of the kids that were in his class. And actually, this is the 7th grade class.
7th grade?
7th grade class, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some, yeah. So when you read the stories about these guys, some of them are in their mid-20s and they're actually going to school. 7th grade.
Wow. Is he there?
Yes. Oh no, I haven't found pictures. I have to go to Haskell Institute and look for his individual picture. But these were provided from Haskell Institute. So getting to know Max and trying to find his names, where he changes his names. So by the time he gets to Haskell Institute, he changes his name to Max Ashini, or Max Ashiha, meaning Max Salt. So during this trying to find him at Haskell Institute I didn't realize I was looking for Max Salt or Max Little Salt, English version, and it was actually in Navajo, his last name. So with the help with my mother, she found that actually, and we actually got the records for Max Ashiha. And so here's another picture of the group that he would have been in. So they're all in their, as you can tell, they're in their uniform regiment clothes here for the boys. And so I'm going to read you a little clip here. So a lot of the boys who went to Haskell Institute they had to go through Army Regiment, and there was actually two elite groups, and Max was actually part of the Troop Company C, and I'll just read you a little bit of them. So it's Troop C, 114th Cavalry, claims the distinct of being the only exclusive Indian troop in the branch of the Army. And here is like this group here is the silent drill team, and Max was a part of this. So they had done they would go into competitions with other boarding schools in the United States, and they had won a particular one where one of them, it says, on the most impressive stunts put on by Company C was the silent drill. First Sergeant Charles E. Grounds would present the troop with rifles in line to the distinguished visitor. After bringing the troop into the order again, Sergeant Grounds would set out of the picture for 9.8 minutes, during which time, without a word of command or guide signal, the Indians would silently, through a drill, involve 1,192 movements, 128 to the minute, from line into column, right and left column into line, to the rear, interspersed with the manual of arms, never leaving the ground assigned, just brushing the lines of spectators, but never touching them. So this is what they did. And here, I was lucky to find this picture of them. And so you see Max Ashini's name, and he was in the 3rd Rifle platoon for the cavalry. And this was in 1924 to 1925. And only the ones that were in here were the students that had high grades, that had high honor grades. And they were part of this particular cavalry. And there's stories from my father and from my uncle how he would talk about Patton, who would come down to Kansas to one of the forts, and that he would be up before the revelry would go on to wake up all the other soldiers, and that he would be prancing with his horse down the parade line. So in 1927, Max gets a letter from his father expressing that he needs to come home and he needs to help the family. So this is Gertie Austin. This is his wife. So Gertie is actually the one who actually comes from the canyon. She's born and raised in the canyon. And she has two older brothers. And she had two sisters, but two of them had passed away, one in childbirth. So she was born in 1910 in Sayet Canyon, and her parents were John and Mary Austin. You'll hear a lot if you come to the series and stuff. This man is a very elusive man right here. His name is Denetso.
Can you speak just a little louder?
Oh, sure. So he's a phantom of the whole canyon. Everybody knows about John Austin, but nobody knows what he looks like.
Ah.
And so throughout the times where I've gone and looked for pictures and seen pictures, nobody can identify who this man looks like. So a lot of the children during this time have already passed away, so nobody can identify. We can only get little lines of what kind of horse that he rode or what he wore. So we're still trying to find a picture of her father. So in 1927, Max gets a letter back from his father saying that he needs to come and help the family. So when he comes back, his father is traveling between Kianta, Tsaya, and Tishanto area, and it's a shortcut going through the canyon. So Jim Littlesalt so happens to stop by the Austin Hogan in the canyon, and John expresses to Jim that his daughter needs to get married, and because they're getting older. And John is born in 1846, and he goes on a long walk, and he comes back when he's a 20-year-old man. So he comes back in 1866 to 1855. And so when he marries Gertie around the turn of 1900, she was born in 1876. So there's quite a age difference between her parents. And so John expresses how he needs to marry his daughter off, because by this time he's in his late 50s, approaching 60s, and needs to marry off his daughter. And so Jim goes back to his homestead near Shanto, and he has 4 available sons that are not married yet. So out of the oldest one, Jerry, is already married into this particular family also. So Max is there, and he's the next oldest of those 4 boys. And of course, like Charlie and my dad jokingly say, oh, they drew straws, or they said, well, I'm too young, I can't get married. So Max decides to go down to the canyon, and they shake hands and they get married.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that's how they get married in June of 1928. And so out of their marriage, they had 6 girls and 6 boys. 11 of them, 10 of them go into adulthood. One boy dies at 20, and the other one dies in infancy. So her occupation was, of course, a house, she stayed at home, and she was a rug weaver. And then she died in 1957. So my father and my Uncle Charlie both were born in 1950 and 1951. So they lost their mother pretty early into their childhood.
What was her name again?
Her name was Gertie Austin, Gertie. So by this time, how does Max come into into this expedition? So by this time, when he comes back, he knows how to read, write, and knows how to, communicate in English. So he knows John Witherell at this time, going back from Sayet Canyon to Kayenta. And it's about a 10 to 12 mile distance between those, from the canyon to Kayenta and Sayet. So they employ Max Little Salt to be the guide and translator. And it just so happens that he's married into this family also, which is another plus for the whole expedition. So at this time, he's 31 years old when this picture is taken during the expedition in 1933. So the expedition lasted from 1933 to 1938. And in 1938, they build I think they called it the Ranger Station at the time at the Navajo Monument. So here is Max and his wife Gertie, and this is Sally Brewer. And nobody can identify this young lady here, but it seems to me that the relation with Sally seems to be her sister at this time. So after the expedition, Max, since he's done translation, he goes on to do his public service for the tribe. So he becomes a translator for, and here in this picture, he does translation for the government, for census, for this Navajo census. So his part is for the Shanto, Sayet, Kabato, Inscription House area. So if you look on the census for the Navajos, all of Max's relatives, their census numbers are right one after the other. So this one, we kind of feel this is just south of Kayenta, where he's helping this government official translate and give numbers to all of these, to different families.
So is he the one wearing the hat?
Yes, this is Max right here. So in the meantime, how does he, Max is not really home a lot, so he's out and about with his brothers trying to find jobs, odd jobs that are necessarily on the reservation. So they go to California. They actually are on the Atchkin, Topeka, Santa Fe Railroad Company, and he is actually the translator for all of the Native Americans, Navajos, and how, to write their names, and this is where you find where he gets his Social Security number, and then when you look at the Social Security numbers too with his brothers, they're one right after the other again with their Social Security numbers. So he was involved with the U.S. Census Bureau, so he did all of the census in the area that they lived in. And while he was away, Gertie here is taking care of all of the children. She's a pretty strong woman. So here is Uncle Charlie. And here's my father. And so today, my father is actually taking care of my Aunt Jean and her animals. So, and then this is my Aunt May, and this is my Aunt Lucy. No, sorry, Lily. Lily. And this one is Nancy, right? And this is Chester. So Chester is one of the older brothers. So here, between him and him, there's probably about a 20 to 21 year age difference between them. So there's a big difference. So here is Jimmy Austin. We like to call him the movie star. During the time when Ford was coming in and doing Western shows or Western movies in Monmouth Valley, Ford would hire my grandfather's cattle and horses. And so he would dress up in other Native American garb, and he would portray himself as a different, and then in attacking the U.S. soldiers in Monmouth Valley. So this is Chester. This is him right here. And here, this is Julia. And with her help, she's the one who actually took this picture of the children during this time. And this lady right here is Mary Austin. So this is Gertie's mother right here. So this is taken in 1967 at the monument. So she was really involved. She was really involved with the monument since it was not too far from her home. So, how does Max become a judge? So through his travels, going from town to town on the reservation, developed a name for himself. So during this time, they had the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Court of Indian Offenses. So they had a vote, and Max was unanimously voted to the judgeship during that time. So when he served in the beginning, he was part of the Court of Indian Offenses for the BIA government department. And during that time, I think in 1960, between 55 and 56, him and five other judges that are appointed they all get appointed to become, and they create the judgeship for the Navajo tribe. So his reputation, he was known as the kind judge during, so when he presided in Window Rock, so he would go from Sayet Canyon and go with either a wagon or go by the mail train or the mail, who was ever running the mail, go from Shanto to Tuba City, go to Flagstaff, catch a bus or catch the train and go all the way to Gallup, New Mexico, and then from Gallup, New Mexico, they would take him to Window Rock. So he did his judgeship there. And so some of the people who knew him and heard his reputation as a judge would stay in jail a lot longer than they should, because they knew they would get a better hearing compared to the other judges that were also in the area. And here, this is the judge's chamber. So this is taken in 1955 by Milton Snow. And here's Max. And here are the other five judges here. And all of them have jurisdiction of different towns that they did. And unfortunately, Max had to travel the farthest. Even though he lived in the Kayenta area, he had to end up traveling the longest way, the longest route to get back to Window Rock to preside over the courts there. So Max, all through his life, had kind of health issues, mainly like asthma and respiratory illnesses. And so by the time 1957 comes around, his wife is not doing so well, and he's not doing so well. In 1958, when his wife passes away, he elects not to continue on as a judge because he has to take care of the last three boys that are still, they're 9 and 10 years old, 7 years old. So he becomes a janitor for the BIA boarding school in Kayenta, and this is how he retires as a janitor in Kayenta to help to be with the last three remaining boys that's still living at home. So during that time, he also, and his brothers and him, one of his brothers starts up the Navajo foster grandparenting in Shanto. And so Max, being a community service, in the community service, he does that for the Kayenta area. So he is actually a foster grandparent to many Navajo children in the Kayenta area during this time, in the late 70s and early 80s. He's served as the president of the Kayenta Tractor House for 8 years. And along with his teachings that he had in Haskell Institute, raising crops, learning how to build homes, he helped the community of Shanto, help them raise crops and build their hogans in the area. And he was known for being a really good hogan maker. So here is Max with his adult children. So here we have Jimmy, and the oldest of all the children is Rose here, and then it would be Jimmy, and then it would be Julia, and then my Aunt Jean, and then here's Lily, and then Nancy, then May, and then my father, and then Uncle Charlie. So this young lady is the representative for the youngest son who died when he was 20. So he doesn't become an adult just yet. So this is taken in 1989, and this is one of his last professional pictures of him. So part of being the Little Salts with his brothers, there's two other family members that were part of the Rainbow Bridge Willamette Valley expedition in 1937 and 1938. So this is Jerry. He's the oldest of the brothers. So this is taken in 1937 or 38, and he also helps out with the expedition for this brief time. And this is before he passes away. So this is a young version of him and an older version of him. And here is his son. So his son, I have to read you this, and I think you guys will like this. So when Richard, Jerry's son, helps out, he's about 13, 14, 15-year-old by that time, helping out with the expedition. And this is what they write in his eulogy about him becoming a private in the Army when he gets drafted. So it says, drafted in March 1945 and discharged in June of 1945. He served for 3 months in the Army, and upon his draft, he was employed to Europe during World War II. Before landing, Hitler gave up because Hitler knew that Richard Salt was coming to get him. So that was part of their eulogy on. So this is him in his early years, and this is him before he passes away in 2004. So those two are the other two that part of the Little Salt family that were part of the expedition. And I'm still learning a lot about them too. And here, like I was saying, the brothers, I would imagine that all 4 brothers were also involved in the expedition because they were all so close related. When they went to the railroad or went to different states, they went not as one person, but as 5 brothers going around. And my mother tells a story that there was a ceremony going on in the late 70s, and all 5 men showed up together, and they were still acting like they were teenagers, picking at each other and, making jokes about each other. So the oldest here is Jerry. And the next, so Max is in between these two here, but this is John Bluesalt, who starts the foster parenting in Shanto. And here is Curly, and then this is George, and he's the youngest of all the boys in here. So they go as a group, so wherever one went, the others follow, and the majority of the time they followed Max around because he was the one who could read and write English. And believe it or not, so George and Max never could drive a vehicle. Even though my grandfather owned a vehicle, he never drove it. He got chauffeured around. So this is in 1989. And here's my father, my mother, here's me, my brother, my sister, and my Uncle Charlie. And here is Max. So this is a quarter of the Little Salt family. So by the time my grandfather passes away in 1997, there's 56 cousins, and there is 97 grandchildren by the time he passes away in 1997.
Wow.
Yeah.